mainly Bach program. That was just a little taster for you, one of Bach's delightful preludes and fugues. Bach wrote 2 sets of these preludes and fugues, by the way, and one of Bach's greatest fans of all time was Frédéric Chopin, who studied Bach very, very carefully and absolutely adored his music. And there's one famous occasion where Chopin was playing to a pupil, and he played, instead of giving them a lesson, he decided to just play to them, and he played 14 of these preludes and fugues in a row, without any music. And when he finished, Chopin's pupil turned to him and said, how did you manage to remember all those preludes and fugues? And Chopin just looked puzzled at the pupil and said, how could you forget them? Well, I'm now going to play one of Bach's most fantastic keyboard works, the Goldberg Variations. This is a work I absolutely adore, and a lot of you, of course, will know the piece, but for those that don't, I thought it would be quite fun to give you a very quick talk, little guide to these pieces, so it might help you in your listening. It is a massive work. It's really an amazing piece of music by Bach. There are 30 variations on a theme, and the theme is a really delightful little piece that Bach wrote for his second wife, Anna Magdalena. He wrote it in a little book called the Anna Magdalena Notebook, which is really a sort of teach yourself the keyboard book. All these very easy pieces that he wrote out for her so that she could learn how to play. It's very sweet to think that one of the greatest geniuses in music should actually write really little easy pieces for his wife to learn. So the theme, which begins like this, is really exquisite. What's amazing is how he took that very simple theme and then developed this quite amazing piece. 30 variations. Now there is a sort of pattern to these variations because every third variation is a canon. Well, let me just show you what a canon is if you don't know what a canon is in music. A canon is like, sometimes it's called a round. It's where you have one melody which is then repeated exactly by another voice. So it's like a carbon copy, only they overlap. They're not synchronized, they slightly overlap, so you don't hear them at the same time. Let me explain. So the first canon, which is variation 3, the canon begins, this is the tune. And then it comes in with its copy. Let me put it with the accompaniment so you can hear the whole thing. I don't know if you can hear that, but it's the same melody, but it's overlapping, and it creates the most beautiful effect. Well, not only that, Bach decides to make it more interesting because not only is every third variation a canon, but with every subsequent third variation, he extends the gap between the voices. For example, that one is called a canon at the unison because the second voice is playing on exactly the same note as the first. The same note. The next third variation, which is variation 6, is a canon at the second, which means the voice comes in one note away from the original. Here's the original voice. And here it is with the canon voice, the carbon copy, which is a second interval away, like this. So it's, in music that's a second, it's just 2 notes away. Then the variation 9, if you're following me, if you're good at your 3 times table, variation 9, all you do is divide by 3, so divide 9 by 3 and you get 3, and so it's a canon at the third, which means 3 notes apart. So here is the first tune, and here's the second tune. It's exactly 3 notes beneath it. This presents all kinds of problems when you're playing this music, by the way. Well, even musically, because you wonder how to bring out these voices. Should you bring out both voices? Should you bring out just one voice? Let me give you an example. I'll play the first phrase of the first voice and then the first phrase of the second voice equally loudly. So you hear almost like the pattern repeating. But you can do different things. You can play the first voice loud and the second voice very quiet. Or you can play the carbon copy voice very loud and the first one quiet. Or you can be really clever and you can bring out the answering melody. This is because these canons, they have a tune and then they have another section which is answering it, which of course is repeated by both the voices. So you can bring out that phrase like this. So it's like this amazing pattern, constantly, there's so many different ways of looking at it. It's like looking at a very clever painting and seeing so many different things in it. But what also is remarkable about this music is that it's fun to listen to. Because anybody with a calculator could have come up with this piece of music, but no one could have come up with something that's such fun to listen to. By the way, with these canons, so if you're good at your 3 times table, when we get to variation 12, divide by 3, you've got a canon at the 4th, so 4 notes apart. Only in this case, it's an upside down canon. The second voice does everything opposite, does everything completely upside down. I don't know if you can hear that, but one is exactly a mirror image of the other. Of course, it gets very confusing too, because sometimes there are things going on in the background that sound like canons but aren't canons. Even when he's got a canon going on, there's another voice that's like a free bass, twiddling away, copying the canons. And of course you could be easily confused because even variation 2, which if you're good at your 3 times table, you realise does not go into 3, or 3 doesn't go into 2, sounds like a canon. So if you're clever, you'll be listening and going, there's a canon. No, it isn't. It just sounds like a canon. But that's variation 2. You have to remember, you've got to remember your 3 times table. Some of the canons are in the minor key and are really unbelievably beautiful. There's an upside down canon, for a better word, that comes in the minor key like this. See there's a pattern there, although it's in reverse. Now the other thing with this piece of music is that Bach very cleverly divides it up overall. For example, you can divide the piece into 3 clear sections. Variation 10 and variation 20 come to a kind of halt. But you can also divide the whole thing in half, the 15 variations and 15 variations. Because halfway through this work there is an overture. The piece almost comes to a halt, and then we have a restart with an overture. Which is a variation still on the original tune. And that can be confusing too, that variation. What is it, I'm lost now, 16? The overture variation. Because it's like a French overture, which is a traditional form. Slow first, fast second. So it has a slow section and a fast section. And again, you might be thinking when the fast section begins, you're into a new variation. But you're not. You're still in the same variation. It's the French overture. So it can be a bit confusing. The other amazing thing about this work is there is an incredible forward momentum in the piece. As you're listening, you feel that Bach is almost tripping over himself and looking forward to the next variation. And they get more and more clever, and they also get more and more virtuosic. As the piece goes on, they get extremely difficult to play. It was originally written for a two-manual harpsichord, this piece, so there's lots of crossing hands, which really you can only do successfully on a harpsichord. Where the hands are moving like this. On the other hand, the incredible pathos of the work, I think, is perfect for the piano, and this is the most wonderful instrument to play the Goldberg variations on. And the heart of the work emotionally is variation 25, which is this very long drawn out minor key variation. Using the most amazing harmonies. And Bach is one of those amazing people who can switch his mood dramatically. 1 minute you're cheerful and fun, next minute it's heart-rendingly beautiful and sad. A few other things I can just show you too. Bach uses this thing called a free bass. I mean, it's not a very good word. It just means that the left hand is tootling around, doing it what it feels like, and ignoring the other parts. And it is quite fun sometimes listening to that part. For example, variation 18, divide by 6. Yes, it's a canon. Canon at the 3 and the 18 goes 6, so it's a canon at the 6. And if you listen, so you have two voices, 6 notes apart, and you have underneath it a perky little free bass that hops around with great fun. Delightful and unpredictable way. Also, some of the variations I think are genuinely comical. I mean, there's one variation where the hands seem to actually be fighting with one another. One hand starts creeping up the keyboard and literally pushes the other one out the way, and then that hand gets its own back and pushes the hand back again like this. Bach had a sense of humour, so that's very obvious in this piece too. And then we come to the last variation, which is variation 30. After all the virtuosity and all the wonderful passion too of this piece, variation 30, and of course you're thinking, divide by 3, it makes 10, it has to be a canon. But no, it isn't. It's the last variation, but it isn't a canon. Instead, Bach decides to make it a Quodlibet. Quodlibet is. It's hard to describe. I mean, in layman's terms, I would say it's a home sing-song, where everyone gathers around the piano and all have a good old sing-song together, only everyone's singing different melodies. This is the kind of thing the Bach family did for fun. You know, they would get together and they would have a fun sing-song in the evening, only they would all sing different tunes and somehow make them all fit together, since they were all extremely clever. And so Bach does this as well with the last variation. But he is also very clever, and in the tunes he chooses, he takes 2 folk tunes, deliberately chooses these 2 folk tunes, and then makes this little sort of sing-song around them. He chooses these folk tunes because of the words. The first folk tune, the words are, it's been a long time since I've seen you, where have you been, or words to that effect anyway. And that's referring to the theme. Because we haven't heard it for a long time. So, where have you been? And then the second folk tune, the words are something like, cabbages and turnips have kept me away. If my mother had cooked meat, I would have stayed longer. That's the second folk tune. And the cabbages and turnips are Bach's referring to his variations. His variations are the cabbages and turnips, which have kept the theme away. So it's just another little in-joke of Bach, which is, I think, absolutely wonderful. And of course, to go along with the whole thing, it's very uplifting music, it's fun music, and you know, having told you all that, you don't need to know any of that to enjoy this music. You can just sit back You can either tick the variations in the program, or you can just close your eyes and enjoy the music. Anyway, I hope that's helped a little bit with the Goldberg variations. But one final thing I could say is, why are they called the Goldberg variations? Well, they should really be called the Kaiserling variations, because they were commissioned by a Russian ambassador who had a problem sleeping at night, had various health issues, and so he commissioned Bach to write a series of, he wanted cheerful variations to sort of entertain him at night while he couldn't sleep. So Bach wrote this set of variations, and the harpsichordist who Kaiserling employed was a man called Goldberg. He was the man that played these pieces, so he must have been a pretty good harpsichordist, and that's why they're called the Goldberg variations.